What's happening, everybody? On today's show, our winners and losers from SEC Week 9. Georgia rolls Florida. The Vols run all over Kentucky. And Auburn finally has a quarterback? Question mark. Also, Kirby Smart takes a shot at Dan Mullen. Locked on SEC starts right now.
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And what's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On SEC. It's great to have you guys along. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnCollege and use our promo code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. Daily fantasy sports made easy over at Prize Picks. I'm Chris Gordy. Thanks for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. All right, let's jump into it. Plenty to discuss. Let's hit on our winners of the weekend. And first and foremost, we got to start with the Georgia defense. It was the cocktail party, and Florida took the opening kickoff down the field on an opening drive to take an early 7-0 lead. And if you blinked, well, it was that quickly 26-7 Georgia. It was the first time the Gators have scored first in this series since 2015, but they only managed just a yard on their next 18 plays, which included 2 turnovers and 4 sacks. After that first drive of the game, the Georgia defense did not give up another point to Florida until the fourth quarter. Bulldogs led 36-7 going into the fourth. Graham Mertz was finally able to get a couple of, we'll call them garbage time touchdowns, but credit the Georgia defense, man, getting after it. 4 sacks on the day. Jalen Walker, Dumas Johnson, Ingram Dawkins, Michael Williams, Damon Wilson. They got after it. Forced a lost fumble by Graham Mertz. Special teams blocked a punt for a safety. Javon Bullard seemed to be everywhere. Led them in tackles this week. Munden with 2 tackles for a loss. Tyke Smith with a pass defense. And every time we seem to question Georgia this season, they show up in a big way, particularly on defense. It's like, hey, they played a close game against Auburn. I'm going to go ahead and pick Kentucky in the upset. Boom. They win 51-13. Yeah, they were a bit uninspired at a win over Vandy. I'm going to pick Florida to upset them. Boom. They win 43-20. Georgia continues to lead the SEC in least amount of points given up per game, allowing just 14 points a week. That's just ahead of Bama, who is in second. Granted, this will be Georgia's toughest test of the season coming up over these next 3 weeks, all against top 20 opponents. They're home against Mizzou, home against Ole Miss, and then at Tennessee. But the most points Georgia has given up on the season, quick trivia question, anybody want to take a guess who it was against? UAB, when Georgia gave up 21. Behind that, they've given up exactly 20 points to Auburn, Vandy, and Florida. But that's it. Nobody has scored more than 21 on them this season. Pretty crazy. Another winner of the weekend. We'll stick with this game. Show some love to Carson Beck, and we'll throw Ladd McConkey in there as well. But give a little love to Georgia's offense. Ladd McConkey with a big day in the absence of Brock Bowers. He finished with 6 catches, 135 yards, and a touchdown, including a 54-yarder. This was just McConkey's 4th game of the season and his first 100-yard game of the year, only the 2nd of his career. Dangerous speed from Ladd McConkey. And how about Georgia quarterback Carson Beck? He goes 19 for 28 this week for 315 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks. It's his 4th 300-yard passing day of the year, and he has thrown for at least 260 yards in all 8 games played this season. And you look at the totals, 73% completion percentage. That's going to break Stetson Bennett's record if he keeps up on that pace. 2,400 passing yards, 17 total touchdowns, 4 interceptions. If Carson Beck keeps this up, especially against the tougher opponents the next couple weeks, he will be in the Heisman conversation, or at least be invited to New York. But a hat tip also to Dejon Edwards. He continues to be a dominant runner, 96 yards and 2 scores this week. He is over 550 rushing yards, 8 touchdowns on the season. And a shout out to tight end Oscar Delp, filling in for the injured Brock Bowers. 2 catches for 31 yards, but one of them was An incredible catch. He reached out and grabbed. He deserves a shout out there. Another winner of the weekend, I've got the Tennessee run game, one of the more entertaining games of the weekend. Tennessee outlasted Kentucky 33-27 in Lexington on Saturday night, and it was the Vol run game that was just straight up nasty, especially in this game or late in the game. 47 carries, 253 yards, and 2 rushing touchdowns. That three-headed attack of Jalen Wright, Dylan Sampson, Jabari Small, they got it done, right? With 120 on the ground, Sampson getting the tough yards late to make a 2-point lead into a 9-point lead. Jalen Wright averaged over 10 yards per carry, and the Vols averaged almost 5.5 yards per rush. Tennessee, they continue to lead the SEC in rush yards per game ahead of both LSU and Ole Miss, and they are 7th in the entire country in rush yards per game. We should also mention Joe Milton had a good week as well. 18 for 21 for 228 yards and a touchdown. That had to be one of his most efficient games. And the Vols sit at 6-2, 3-2 in the conference. 4 games remain. They get UConn, then at Mizzou, home against Georgia, and home versus Vandy. It is hard to envision Tennessee beating both Mizzou and Georgia, but if they split those, they win the rest, they'll be 9-3, and that's pretty strong considering how things were looking a few weeks ago for the Vols. Another winner of the weekend, Quinshon Judkins over at Ole Miss. When you want to get momentum going, just play Vanderbilt, as Ole Miss beat the Commodores in Oxford 33-7. And a big reason why that dominant run game for the Rebels, Quinshon Judkins led the way, 17 carries, 124 yards, 2 rushing touchdowns. It was Quinshon's third 100-yard rushing game of the season, 3 in his last 4 games. And he's starting to look more and more like that guy who led the SEC in rushing a year ago. Right now, Quinshon Judkins 4th in the SEC in rush yards at 691. He's only behind Ray Davis, Cody Schrader, and Jalen Wright. And Ole Miss as a team, 3rd in the conference in rushing yards behind Tennessee and LSU. And the Rebels just continue to win, man. They're 7-1 on the year, 4-1 in the conference. Any concern for this being a trap game, that went out the window by halftime. Lane Kiffin said we're 19-2 in our last 21 home games. That is pretty cool. Another winner of the weekend from this game, I've got the Ole Miss defense. 5 sacks on the day for the Rebels in their win against Vandy. Defensive performance led by Jared Ivey, who had 2.5 sacks, 2.5 tackles for a loss. Very impressive. Cedric Johnson, J.J. Pegues had sacks as well. Trey Washington had 2 interceptions. And the Rebels held Vandy to just 229 total yards on the day. Only 60 passing yards combined from Ken Seals and Walter Taylor. Kiffin saying, I'm really proud of our defense. They were great all day. Felt like we had big sacks, significant sacks. Our D-line was after it. Great to see. Great defensive performance. Pete Holding doing a nice job. Just got to watch for Ole Miss, though. Last November, Ole Miss was 8-1, ranked as high as number 7 in the AP poll before they finished 0-4, including a Texas Bowl loss. The Rebels will host Texas A&M 11 a.m. Central this Saturday. Ole Miss has won 2 straight and 5 of the previous 8 meetings in the series. Just a little weary on Ole Miss. You don't want to buy into that fool's gold, but they look to be pretty damn strong this year. Another winner of the weekend, Payton Thorne. Welcome to the winners category, Payton Thorne. He makes his first appearance here all season long, and Payton Thorne was outstanding. Looking like the guy that Auburn pulled in from the transfer portal from Michigan State this past weekend as he beat Mississippi State 27-13. 20 for 26, 230 yards, 3 passing touchdowns, no picks. Connected with his wide receivers, touchdowns to Javarius Johnson and Shane Hooks. Also had 8 rushes for 38 rushing yards. That's what we had hoped for Auburn's passing game to look like weeks ago. Auburn got a much-needed SEC win over Mississippi State. They improved to 4-4, 1-4 in the conference. Shout out to Jarquez Hunter as well. 17 carries for 144 rushing yards. His first 100-yard rush game of the year. And now some more winnable games for Auburn these next 3 weeks. At Vandy, at Arkansas, home against New Mexico State before they host the Iron Bowl. There is a world where Auburn can win these next 3 and be 7-4 going into the Iron Bowl. But look, Payton Thorne's going to have to play a lot more like that over the next couple weeks. That was good to see. Another winner of the weekend, I've got Texas A&M's offensive line. Look, after the first drive, they really settled down, started protecting Max Johnson, gave him time to throw. A&M scored 3 touchdowns in the second quarter to take a 21-7 halftime lead over South Carolina. O-line did a good job protecting Johnson, threw for 249 yards and a touchdown. Amari Daniels rushed for 68 yards and a score. Ruben Owens had 40 yards and a score. And Max Johnson did end up getting sacked 3 times on the day, but the Aggie O-line, they've had a lot of rough performances this year. And this week I thought they were largely very good. Shout out to Aniyah Smith, 118 yards receiving on the day for him. And the Aggies snapped their 2-game SEC losing streak. They get back to 5-3, 3-2 in the conference. Next up, they go to Ole Miss, home against Mississippi State, home against Abilene Christian, and then a road trip to LSU to finish the year. Right now, it feels like they'll lose at Ole Miss and at LSU. That would get them to 7-5. That's improvement for Jimbo, but is it enough for him to keep his job? And the last winner of the weekend, I'm throwing in here, Edgerrin Cooper, the Aggies linebacker, entered the game leading the SEC with 13.5 tackles for loss. Added 2 more on Saturday. The junior also had 4 quarterback hits, broke up a pass, forced a fumble, led the team in tackles with 7. He had a sack, a pass defensed, and Edgerrin Cooper just having a monster year at A&M. I think he's one of the best defensive players in the conference this year. He's a junior, his 4th season in College Station, but just having a huge breakout year. Last season, he had 0 sacks. This year, he's got 7 so far, only trails Dallas Turner and Bookie Watson. I'm excited to see what Edgerrin Cooper will do this weekend at Ole Miss against Jackson Dart. And there you have it. Those are our winners of the weekend. Coming up next, we'll get to who depressed us in SEC Week 9. That is coming your way in just a sec. I want to remind you guys, now it is time for your Game Changer of the Week, brought to you by Athletic Brewing Company. Look, much like Georgia completely changed their game against Florida early in the first half, Athletic Brewing has completely changed the non-alcoholic beer game. They make non-alcoholic beers that actually taste good. They are great tasting, award-winning. They beat out full-strength beers in global competitions. They brew over 50 styles of craft non-alcoholic beers, including IPAs, Goldens, Sours, and more. They're always working on new limited edition experimental styles, and they are fit for all times, so you can drink them anytime, anywhere, and make any activity even more enjoyable. Whether you're watching a big game, watching your kids' game, working out, whatever it is, no hangovers ever. You can find Athletic in-store, online, and at bars across the country. They're the fastest growing non-alcoholic brewery in the U.S., so go hop on board. Again, check them out at a store near you, or you buy them online at athleticbrewing.com. And the best part is, first-time customers, you can use our promo code LOCKEDON to get 15% off your first order online. That is LOCKEDON at checkout. Get 15% off at athleticbrewing.com. Near beer, exclusions and conditions apply. Athletic Brewing Company, fit for all times. Also want to remind you about our friends over at eBay Motors. Look, passion, drive, and patience is what brings home the winning trophy. It is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, whatever it is you need. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors, they've got you covered. Over 122 million parts for your ride or die. You're always going to find exactly what you're looking for. With that eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back. With eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. They got all the parts you need at the prices you want. It is easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, available to U.S. customers. ebaymotors.com. Going along here, Locked On SEC. Thank you guys for making us your first listen every day. Shout out to our everydayers. Come back and check us out. Tomorrow on the show, we will recap everything that happened at the Monday press conferences. So that is all coming your way tomorrow. And reminder, on Fridays, you can check out our Locked On College Football Preview Show right here on our Locked On SEC channel, or whichever is your favorite Locked On College Football channel. They'll be breaking it all down there for you. All right, we did our winners of the weekend. Who impressed us? Now we get into our who depressed. We don't like to say losers. It's a little bit disrespectful, but we had some losers this week. So let's dive into it. And we start with Billy Napier over at Florida. Look, I've been praising Billy Napier last week with wins over Tennessee, South Carolina. They were 5-2 on the season. They were 3-1 in the conference. Was feeling good about the Gators. But this week against Georgia, Billy Napier's offense went 4 for 11 on third downs, 0 for 2 on fourth downs, a lost fumble by Graham Mertz. And it just looked like after that first offensive drive, almost like his team was not ready for this game. Florida found themselves down 26-7 at the half. They trailed 36-7 late in the third quarter. And Georgia sniffed out two trick plays in this one, including a 4th and inches pass at their own 34-yard line. That proved to be the turning point. Felt a lot like last year's game. I know Anthony Richardson and company kind of closed the gap a little bit at one point, but last year's game was 42-20, Georgia. This year was 43-20. So basically 1 point off. I can't completely crush Florida here. You lost to Georgia. They're the number one team in the country, but the Bulldogs in this rivalry have now won 6 of the last 7. And look, Napier, you even brought in Coach Spurrier to talk to the team this past week to motivate them. Gators just had no signs of life when it came to scoring points. Georgia's 3-game streak over Florida has been by a combined score of 119-47. They just can't score in this rivalry, an indication how significant the gap may be still between Georgia and Florida. But next up, the Gators host Arkansas on Saturday, a chance to become bowl eligible for the second time this year, or in 2 seasons under Napier. So that's kind of big. Some people only had them at 5.5 wins on their season total this year. So a win over Arkansas would be significant for the Gators. See if they can do it. Another depressed of the weekend. How about the Kentucky run defense? We talked about it earlier, but Tennessee, 253 rushing yards on the ground. Kentucky could just not get a stop when they needed one most. Early in the fourth quarter, Wildcats trailed 26-24 and missed a field goal that would have given them the lead. So all the defense had to do was get a stop, get the ball back, give your offense a chance. But Dylan Sampson goes right down the field, run after run after run on Kentucky. They go down, score a touchdown. They go up 9. And that was kind of all she wrote. The Wildcats had 5 tackles for a loss on the day with 2 sacks, but they just got gashed in the run game by Tennessee, especially late. And after starting the season 5-0, Kentucky has now lost 3 in a row to Georgia, Mizzou, and Tennessee, the last 2 at home in Lexington. They do have winnable games at Mississippi State and at South Carolina, but it's on the road. And then a home game against Alabama. That will be very difficult. And then they'll finish the season on the road at 7-1 Louisville. That won't be easy as well. So Mark Stoops' crew maybe just focus on getting a win this weekend in Starkville. That will get you to bowl eligibility. And as we know, Mark Stoops, he's been getting into bowl games every year at Kentucky. So that would be significant. But Kentucky got to kind of right the ship here. What's been going on these last couple of weeks? All right, another depress of the weekend. I got South Carolina's offense. Much like Florida, South Carolina, they score an early touchdown in College Station, take a 7-0 lead on the Aggies, but then it would go downhill very quickly. They would find themselves down 21-7 at the half. At Texas A&M would go on to win 30-17. Spencer Rattler and the Gamecocks, they finished the day with just 209 yards of total offense. Rattler threw for 176 through the air, and the Gamecocks rushed for a team net of 33 yards on the ground. Texas A&M, 4 sacks on the day, but it felt like more than that. And Spencer Rattler came into this game averaging 277 passing per game. Well, like I said, managed just 176. The Aggies hurried and harassed Rattler all day. He was called for not 1, not 2, but 3 intentional grounding plays on consecutive drives in the second quarter while trying to escape the rush. We were posing the question, what's the record for most intentional grounding calls in a game? Spencer Rattler was going for the record. Gamecocks were just 5 of 16 on third down, 1 for 3 on fourth down. They lost a fumble. And this same offense that a couple weeks ago scored 39 in that loss to Florida, they scored 12 points and 17 points in back-to-back weeks. And Shane Beamer's crew, now just 2-6 on the year, 1-5 in SEC play. Beamer saying after the game, we're a team that has gotten better as the year has gone on every single year, and this year should be no different. So his expectations of this team gets better in the weeks remaining. Now, South Carolina has 4 straight home games to finish off the season, and they are all winnable. Jacksonville State, Vandy, Kentucky, and Clemson. They all come to Columbia. Time to button up, strap in, and see if you can get those wins. But a loss in any of those remaining games, and South Carolina will not be going bowling this year under Shane Beamer. Another deep press of the weekend, I got Mississippi State's defense. Hate to kick the dogs when they're down, but the Bulldogs lost at Auburn 27-13. They allowed Payton Thorne to play one of his best games of the season. Thorne had thrown for 200 yards this season in just one other game, and that was against Samford. He did it against Mississippi State, an anemic Auburn offense. They put up over 400 yards on State as the Bulldogs did not record 1 sack on the day. And this is a team with Bookie Watson, who leads the SEC in sacks with 8. Next up, Mississippi State gets Kentucky. Then they're at A&M before coming home for Southern Miss, and then Ole Miss in the Egg Bowl at 4-4. They need 2 more wins in those next 4 to get to a bowl game. See if Zach Arnett can rally the troops. Another deep press of the weekend, I got Clark Lee and Vandy. Again, hate to kick somebody when they're down, but it's just not good over at Vandy. They started the year 2-0. They have now lost 7 games in a row. They are 0-5 in the SEC. Vandy had just 229 total yards in their loss at Ole Miss this week. They were led by reserve quarterback Walter Taylor, coming in for Ken Seals. He led a third-quarter scoring drive. And traditionally, Vandy has played well against Ole Miss, but not this time. Midway through the second period, the offense had crossed midfield once through an interception and had 31 total yards of offense. Vandy coach Clark Lee after the game said, obviously, we're disappointed. We wanted to play better, and we didn't. Hard to see Vandy winning a conference game this year. I know we all got excited. They won 2 last year. They beat Florida. They beat Kentucky. It was like, Clark Lee's building something there. It's looking pretty bleak for Vandy. I get it. Quarterback got hurt earlier in the year, but just not been good, particularly defensively. And that's Clark Lee's calling card. Our last loser of the weekend, it's not Kirby Smart, it's Dan Mullen. And it's Kirby Smart taking a shot at Dan Mullen. And here's a little bit of what that sounded like.
And I don't see it or hear it, but I know it's out there. Somebody texted me before the game. It's like all these people predicting that we're not gonna, we're not gonna win today. And I'm just like, golly, where's that coming from? It's supposed to be my friend. He didn't like to recruit though, so it gets him.
Dan Mullen, prior to this game on Saturday, picked the Florida Gators to upset the Georgia Bulldogs. As we know, Kirby Smart hates few things in this world more than the Florida Gators. So he was perturbed when he heard that his buddy Dan Mullen picked against them. He said, where's that coming from? And then he took a subtle jab at Dan Mullen saying, supposed to be my friend. Well, he didn't like to recruit, though. Shots fired by Kirby Smart. And look, he's got scoreboard, right? Dan Mullen doing very well, though, making good money over there at ESPN and doing a nice job as an analyst, but picked Florida to beat the Bulldogs, and Kirby let him have it there. So there you have it. That's our winners and losers of the weekend. Coming up next, we will get to where do the SEC teams fall in the latest polls. We'll run through that in just a second. This episode presented to you by our friends over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks, the largest independently owned daily fantasy sports platform in North America. They are the easiest and most exciting way for you guys to play daily fantasy sports. It is just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, you just pick more than or less than on anywhere from 2 to up to 6 player stat projections, and you will watch the winnings roll in. It's super easy to do. It's fun to do. And Prize Picks, I guarantee you, it'll be the most fun you will have, winning up to 25 times your money this football season. You just select 2 or more players, you pick more or less on their projected stats, and you place your entry. They got tons of different college football games to choose from. Some of them from the SEC fall in there, and you could test your skills on Prize Picks throughout football season. The most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. If you got the skills, you can turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps. Prize Picks, really simple to play. You can make your picks, submit your entry in less than 60 seconds. They offer quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types. That's what makes Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Go check them out right now. prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege. Make sure you use our promo code LockedOnCollege. That will get you your first deposit match up to $100. Again, prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege. Use the promo code LockedOnCollege. Get that first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, it is daily fantasy sports made easy. Going along here, Locked On SEC. Thank you guys so much for making us your first listen every day. And before we call it a show, let's dive into the AP poll here as they are getting into it with the latest rankings from SEC teams and where they fall. Georgia, this is the AP poll first. Georgia, #1 for the 20th straight week. They received 48 of 63 first-place votes, distancing themselves from #2 Michigan after they absolutely walloped Florida on Saturday. Michigan had a bye. And this is the 50th consecutive week that either Georgia or Alabama has been #1 in the AP poll. Texas, they stayed put at #7, while Alabama moved up to #8, and Penn State to 9th. So here is how it shakes out in the AP poll. We got 6 SEC teams in there. Georgia 1, Alabama 8, Ole Miss 11, LSU, they are #13, Mizzou 14, and Tennessee 19. The SEC and Pac-12 were tied with 6 teams ranked. The coaches poll was pretty similar. They were a little bit kinder. They had Georgia 1 just like the AP. They had Alabama 8 just like the AP. They had Ole Miss up 1 spot. Ole Miss 11 in the AP, 10th in the coaches poll. So Ole Miss right there sitting, looking like a top 10 team. They also had LSU 13, Mizzou 14. Now, the AP poll, they had Tennessee at 19. Coaches poll had them up to 16. So that is the latest. 6 SEC teams ranked there, but both in the AP and coaches poll. Now, the few other notes coming out of the weekend, the cocktail party will not be played at either Georgia or Florida's campus anytime soon. This is from a report that came out from the AP on Sunday. According to a report, the 2 teams are exploring other neutral site venues for 2026 and 2027. That's when Jacksonville is expected to renovate their stadium, so they can't play it in Jacksonville. Now, administrators are planning to let cities with NFL stadiums bid to host the game. In 2026, though, the game would likely be played in Atlanta at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. That would give kind of Georgia a little bit of a home field. And it would move to Florida the following year with Camping World Stadium in Orlando, Raymond James Stadium in Tampa, and Hard Rock Stadium in Miami, all as possible locations. So just something to keep an eye on there. A few other SEC notes. SEC Network's weekly traveling pregame show, SEC Nation. They are off to Oxford this coming weekend. They will highlight the #12 Ole Miss Rebels against Texas A&M. Show will originate from the Grove from 10 a.m. until noon Eastern, and that will be fun to watch. Of course, Laura Rutledge hosts SEC Nation, her 7th season in the chair, along with Paul Feinbaum, Roman Harper, Jordan Rogers, and Tim Tebow. Marty McGee also going to be on site there. As we know, College Gameday announced they're heading to Tuscaloosa ahead of Alabama versus LSU, so that one will be a lot of fun this weekend. And that is going to do it for this edition of Locked On SEC. Thank you guys again for checking us out every day. Shout out to our everydayers. Keep coming back, checking us out, whether you're listening to the audio version or the video version over on YouTube. Keep coming back, checking us out. New updated SEC info every day. We're here 45 days a week talking all things SEC football. I'm Chris Gordy. This has been Locked On SEC. Big week this week, guys. Some monster games, particularly the games that could decide the SEC East and SEC West. Georgia versus Mizzou and LSU versus Bama. We'll be breaking it all down all week long, give you tidbits on those games and much more. This has been Locked On SEC. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow.